Tim here, and today I'm going to share with you my top 5 piano exercises for beginners. By mastering these exercises, you can go from zero playing ability to being able to play up and down the piano effectively. Number 5 on the list are scales, and I love scales so much because they actually introduce us to a lot of beginner topics that you're going to need to master to learn piano effectively. Things like the layout of each key signature. So what a scale is essentially is when you lay out all the notes that exist within a key. So say we're in the key of C, and you play them from the starting note, C, and you play all the notes in between and stop at the next C. So you've played a C major scale, and part of the definition of C major is it has 0 sharps, 0 flats. But not all scales are like that. For example, the key of G has 1 sharp towards the end, that F sharp there. So by learning your scales, you're going to learn visually on the piano how each key looks. So like say we have the key of D major. Well, if I know my D major scale, I know the sharps F and C are sharped, and I know that they're located right here. So the first benefit is it helps you learn the layout of the keys. The next benefit is it will introduce you to basic finger crossings, because when you play these, and if you want to be able to play up and down the piano effectively, you have to make sure that you have the right finger crossings at the right time, or what will happen is this: you'll run out of fingers and you won't be able to finish out the scale. So finger crossings is another great benefit. And you may be saying, Tim, I can't remember all this stuff. I don't know what scales to learn in what order or where all the finger crossings are, because that would be like a 3-hour lesson. Well, guess what? We don't need to do 3 hours today, unless you really want me to, and then I'll stick around. But anyway, I want you to get the complete book of scales, chords, arpeggios, and cadences, because this is going to introduce you to the scales in the order in which you're supposed to learn them. So C major is first, and then G major is next, and then D major is next. Ooh, how did I know that? Well, I've been practicing these a long time. They introduce you to the scale, things called arpeggios we'll talk about in a minute, and a bunch of other things that you'll need throughout your piano playing journey. So pick this up to not only learn what scales you need to know, but the order you need to learn them in, and with the correct fingerings, because each scale has slightly different finger crossings you're going to want to be aware of. Okay, scales are great and everything. They introduce us to how keys are laid out, finger crossings and all that. But there's another exercise actually that does a similar thing, but in a different way. You probably want me to explain, right? And I'm of course talking about arpeggios. Now, this is a chord. We call that either a triad, it's a 3-note chord. Some people call it a block chord because you're playing it all at once as a block. But you can also play them notes separately. I know, it's very shocking to know that. And when you play them separately, that is what we call an arpeggio. And songs like to use a lot of chords and patterns of chords called chord progressions, but they also use a lot of arpeggios. So you're going to want to learn these and learn them well. And when you're learning scales, and when you're learning arpeggios, you want to learn them multiple octaves. And to accomplish this, you're going to have to do another finger cross, but there's a bit more distance than when we were doing scales, because all those notes were right in a row, but we're skipping notes now. So when we do the finger cross underneath, we need to kind of have this gliding pivot that happens to be able to hit those notes effectively and accurately. And again, you may be saying, well, where do I learn all the finger crossings from? Well, guess what? Scales, chords, ding, 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 arpeggios. So pick up this book. It'll introduce you to all the arpeggios in the order that you should learn them. And I want to quickly mention, you can actually start learning your arpeggios at the same time you learn your scales. So when I'm learning my C major scale, after I play the scale, I can play C major arpeggio, and I would actually do that 2 octaves. And all that means is instead of playing one set of arpeggios, you go up and you play another one. And I like to hit this C up here and then come back down like so. So C major is the first one you want to learn. But anyway, when I'm learning these, I'm going to practice the scale and then the arpeggio. So by the time I've learned all my scales, guess what? I've learned all my arpeggios. All right, I believe we're on number 3 of this list. So this is my third favorite piano exercise, and they are Hanon exercises. So what you want to do is go into Google, type in Hanon exercises, and it's this first one here, hanon-online.com. You click on that, and it brings you to this page. You scroll down, and you have a ton of exercises to choose from, and these are known as Hanon exercises. We'll take a look at number 1 here and download it. So here we have our first Hanon exercise, and I'm going to play just the first measure, and I want you to see if you can pick up on a pattern. So I'm just going to do the right hand first. And here's the second measure. And here's the third measure. See if you can pick up on the pattern. Fourth measure. Fifth measure. Did you figure it out yet? And the answer is it's the same pattern, except each time you just move up one note. See that? And you move up one, same pattern. And the pattern is you play C, you skip a note to E, and then you play from E up to A and back down. And then you just move up one there. And once you got the pattern, it's pretty easy. Now, the tricky thing is adding the left hand to it. The good thing about these is that these are a repeated pattern all the way up, so no need for finger crossings, at least right now. And what these are really good for, because you're playing in parallel, meaning you're playing the same note, just an octave apart, these are really good for basic hand coordination. That's why I really recommend them. After you learn, all your major scales, you can start practicing these. And it does seem a bit repetitive, but they are really good at working out a specific part of your hand. For example, this first example here, where we have like kind of a larger gap between the first two notes. Well, if I really learn that and start playing it faster, I really feel a workout between the bottom two notes in the pattern, because that's where that space is at. So that works out that part of the hand. Each exercise is a little different. Let me go to number 2 and we'll see like what part of the hand it might work on. So here's number 2. Let me just play the first few measures. Now let's see if there's a difference here. Ooh, right away. Remember the first pattern I played was where they go up all in order. But this has actually changed up the order of the notes. So like before, we started out with an opening between our first two fingers here. And then we kind of skip up here and then kind of changes the order. So not only does it work out the bottom part of my hand, but then it's kind of like a little bit of workout on the middle of the hand, doing this like little turnaround here. And I'm telling you, once you start to speed these up, then you're really going to feel what I'm talking about. You're going to be like, oh, I really feel it there. I can really feel it in the middle there. So you want to learn these exercises. The fun part, let's go back to exercise number 1 real quick, is that when you get to the top of the exercise, so usually you start from C, and you play all the way up until you get to G. And then what it does is it does the inverse of the exercise you just did. I mean, it's the same exercise. It's just now you're skipping down, skipping a note. And it's just in the opposite direction. Now, I gave myself a second to think about it, and it wasn't that hard. But trust me, when you are going ascending, going up, and you're doing that turnaround to go back, it can be quite tricky. And let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to start right up here. Here, I'm going to turn around. Oh, I did it. And what it really reminds me of when you do that turnaround is, I don't know, when you're a little kid, you probably did this. You spun around in one direction, And then real quick, if you spin around in the other direction, what happens? Your brain gets all confused and it's really, really hard to manage with. And these hand exercises always reminded me of that, is spinning in one direction. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, you got to go the other way. And I've always enjoyed teaching these to students. They're a bit simple, but you're actually going to get a lot out of these. And there's a ton to learn from. I would master each one though. And what I mean by that is this. So I would learn the exercise first. You know, at a slow tempo. You may even have to go way slower than me, which is fine. But then what I would do is I would see if I can get it up to speed. And luckily, I still remember this from when my piano teacher made me do it. But the point I'm trying to make is don't just learn like one of these exercises and move on to the next. Make sure that you kind of have it mastered. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect, but you do have to feel comfortable playing it with relatively few mistakes. Okay, this time, this is number 2, my number 2 favorite piano exercise. I want you to go to pianoexercises.org this time, and we are going to click on Carl Czerny, and we're going to click on School of Velocity, and it's going to look something like this. Now, I want to mention, all these exercises I'm going to show you today layer on like a cake. So work on just the scales to start out with, right? If you're brand new. And once you learn, your major scales, which you're going to learn from that book I showed you, then you're going to start with the arpeggio. Well, you're going to learn the arpeggios at the same time as the scales, like I mentioned. But then right after that, then you want to learn your hand and exercises. Don't try to learn all of the exercises at once that I'm trying to tell you about. Just make sure that you layer them on like a cake. Master those scales first. Then start adding on hand. And then once you feel comfortable with a bunch of those, then start adding on these exercises, the Czerny School of Velocity. The great thing about these exercises is it combines a lot of ideas from a lot of exercises. For example, in the right hand here, we just have these scales coming down. You can see that like just by these groupings of notes, and that's just really the C major scale. So once you learn that scale, you're pretty much set for this. However, you got to be careful because they start messing with it and you start doing the C major scale starting on different notes. So you just got to be a little careful there. But other than that, we don't have to worry about sharps or flats. Left hand is just pretty simple chords. And when it comes together, it starts to sound like a piano piece, like a practice piano piece. And we call those practice piano pieces etudes. And it's a really good workout for scales. And one thing that I really liked about it is when I did the opening here, like that gap that you have to hit, it's really good for jumping large gaps on the piano and being able to hit those notes more accurately, which is something I get a lot, is like if I'm down on this end of the piano, how do I hit a note way up there and get back down? You may see that, when somebody's performing, they can hit those large gaps. And exercises like this is going to get you much more prepared to do something like that. Okay, let's go back to the exercises for a minute, because there is a huge, and I mean huge, variety here of exercises to play. Now, one thing I want to say is they like to flip the exercises on their head. So number 1 exercise had chords on the bottom and scales up top. This one has chords in the right hand and scales on the bottom. So going through each exercise introduces you to a different type of pattern that's going to be useful. Now, I want to look at number 3 down here on the bottom, because it should have something that we've seen before. Let me just play just the first measure just to see it. Now, it says presto, which is very fast, but I'm going to play it slow. 1, because I don't have this practiced yet. And then 2, so you can pick up on what I'm trying to say. So here we go. See if you can pick it out. And you may be able to pick out that this, with the right hand, is an arpeggio, right? Sounds familiar. But then what they do is they invert it, where you're playing the arpeggio in a different order. So instead of like C, E, G, now you're playing it E, G, C, G, C, E, C, E, G. Just like that. So the point I'm trying to make is the reason we learn the arpeggios, the scales and stuff, is that they really do show up in our music. Even though this is a practice piece, you can definitely find a ton of music out there that does the same thing. Okay, I still have yet to show you my favorite exercise. And actually, I came across these exercises, the last ones I'm going to show you. I came across these recently, and I saw them, and I really love them that much that I had to put them in this next video about piano exercises. So I hope you really enjoyed that final set. But before we do that, I do have a question I want to ask you, and this is mandatory. If you don't answer this in the comments, I'm not going to make any more videos. And I'm just kidding, of course. So the question is this. Out of all the exercises that I've talked about, scales, arpeggios, Hanon, Czerny, which exercises would you like a full lesson on? So I can make a whole lesson just on scales, just on Czerny. Let me know, what exercises are you the most interested in? I think that's the question to ask. I'd really appreciate your time on this. Thank you so much. And I do actually have one final set of exercises to rule them all. So let's talk about that. Okay, now it's time for the final set of exercises. And I came across these recently, and I was so impressed that I'm like, man, I got to share these with the students. And these are perfect to learn after all the exercises I've learned. So once I've taught you about. So once you've learned a lot of the Czerny exercises, your arpeggios, your scales, things like that, then start on these, because this is Burgmüller's 25 Easy and Progressive Studies. And the reason I love these so much is the word progressive. It starts out on the easier side, but quickly builds to more complicated time signatures, key signatures, patterns to play, things like that. And by the end, you have advanced quite a bit in playing ability, which is why I love it, because it's progressive. But that's not the only reason. I love so much that each example varies so much in its style and the way it's played. For example, these are in different key signatures, time signatures. They're in major keys or minor keys, and they all have different types of sounds. I'll even show you the difference just in the first line here between these first three exercises. Here's the first one, which is played kind of light on the keys and in a major key. Here's number 2. We're in a different time signature, Allegro scherzando in the beginning up there, and that's going to tell us to play it fast. And it's going to have quite a bit of different sound to it. It's also in a minor key. So here we go. Here's a third one. This one's quite a bit different. This one's in 6/8 time signature. It's going to have more of a dancey type of feel, I guess, just by looking at it. And we're also in a different key signature, meaning we have F sharps throughout. And by learning these different exercises in these different styles, it prepares you much better for playing real pieces, because not every piece you're going to play is going to be in the same key signature or time signature. But it also makes these a little bit more advanced, which is why I put them last. But let's take a look at this number 3 here and see if you can hear a difference in the sound compared to the other first two exercises. And then obviously if we kept going, each one of these, as you can tell, has just looks vastly different visually from everything else before it. And that translates into, again, how it's played. Getting used to playing these different patterns better prepares you for playing real music. So learn these. Okay, we still have one final tip to rule them all. But first I want to say that these exercises, this is very important. You want to layer on like a cake. You don't want to start learning your scales, arpeggios, Hanon, Charity, Bergmuller all at the same day. It's not going to work out right. Like I said, you can learn scales and arpeggios at the same time, but then after that, I would start learning Hanon. And then after you learn a bunch of those, then add on the other one and layer it on like a cake. And this video is part of a larger new series that I've created for beginners. The goal is to catch beginners up on everything they need to succeed as a beginner student. So you want to check out the rest of the lessons in that series right here. It's been your piano teacher, Tim, here. Thanks for coming by, and I'll see you next time.